And we'll let you know, I will be sending out a newsletter. I thought I'd get it out yesterday, but I didn't. And letting everybody know about BlogTalk. We've got several things in the hopper. Dr. Tim's looking at a couple directions for me, and I'm looking as well. And there's a couple of sites that have been recommended, and so none of them will do both storing of the archives and doing live shows. So we still have two different directions that we have to go. But we are attempting to get it all worked out before BlogTalk goes away at the end of January. We will have a way of still doing live shows. If it's not one of these other platforms, we will do it by Zoom. And of course, when you dial in, it'll be the same Zoom number every day. So you can just save it in your phone. And when you Zoom in, you can either have your camera on or not. That's optional for every person that calls in. And then we'll have to upload from Zoom to YouTube and store them there. But anyway, we'll get it all figured out one way or the other. And it sounds like Spotify, which most people have Spotify on their phone, they will store our archives, all of them, 5,000 some hours, and but it's not a platform that we can do a live show, but we can host all of our archives there. So we may do that. Most people have Spotify, so it'd be easy for them to tap into the archives. But we'll keep you informed as we find out what's going on. And Michael's joined us, so I'm going to say welcome, Michael. I just shared with them their morning. Can't hear you through the phone. I can hear him talking through the wall.
Mute challenge.
Yeah, okay.
I can hear you through the wall, but not through the window.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So welcome, everybody. Yeah, we had a very sweet morning. This little girl who joined us, her grandparents are in Mexico, so couldn't be there. A real sweetheart that we've met many times before at the school. And my mind couldn't help going to the place of holding the space for her and her family, that she'd be safe when these monstrous ideas of blaming immigrants happen, and that they become targets of monstrous minds that are filled with so much rage and hatred that they can't stand their own lives, so have to go and disturb others. Pretty crazy. But just this innocent little child, and imagining what may be in store for her and her family is just a tragedy. So I had to breathe, still breathing. And beyond that, we had a wonderful mind shifter and still point breathing session this weekend. And we do it every month, but this year, or pardon me, this next month, December, since it falls just 4 days before Christmas, the mind shifter and still point breathing session. And we checked with some of the participants from this weekend, and they couldn't make it the weekend before. And on the 27th, we have, we've got lots of prep to do to get there. We're going to Nashville to be with Ryan, Jeannie's son, ball-sized brain tumor down in the lower quadrant, pressing against his brain stem. They're pretty sure it's benign. It's not the kind of tumor that's usually a problem, except to get it out of there because it's pressing on the brainstem. But so we're heading to Nashville on the 26th, and so we're going to just cancel the mind shifters and still point breathing for session for December, and pick it up again the third weekend in January. So if you decide you wanted to join us, that's something to register for coming up January. I think you said maybe it was 21st.
It is. Let me flip the calendar here. January the 18th and 19th.
18th and 19th. So.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah. The one in December was going to end up being the 21st and 22nd, which just being days before Christmas. That was a little much.
Right. Yeah. So we invite everybody to hold the space for Ryan, of course, and for little Lupita and her family, and everybody else who does so much. It's just horrific, the big focus on the minuscule criminal element when there are so many people that do so much. And many people haven't thought this through at all, but if this atrocity of rounding up and unfortunately, quote, bloody removal happens, the American economy is going to crash. For two reasons. Three reasons, actually. One, this is going to cost so much money and create so much trauma within the culture, within the country. Two, most of the immigrant community, especially from Mexico, are some of the hardest working people you will find anywhere in the world. An interesting movie if you want to take a bird's eye view if you haven't seen it. And the name is now escaping me. Fairmont. Do you know that movie with Kevin Costner, Jeannie? Anyway, based on a true story about a teacher who ends up being demoted to this lowly immigrant community in Southern California and ends up for the first time in his life finding actual family and sees the hard work that these, especially the kids do, that they actually go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning in the fields to help their parents. If you think we got high food prices now, you just wait till they kick these people who are doing all these jobs that Americans won't do. Just wait till you see what happens to food prices. McFarland, that was it. But it's a true story, and this teacher, who's kind of a renegade, ends up he's played by Kevin Costner, but he ends up being demoted to this lowly community in this lowly little lousy school. And he watches these kids and how hard they work, and especially when they finish their 5 a.m., work in the fields in order to get to school, the way they run. And he's like, these kids run like the wind. He's an athletic coach. I've never seen kids run like this. And we need to honor their running. And the teacher, the school's like, look, forget it. This is it. And he ends up literally building a California championship running team with these kids. The upshot of the movie is where all these kids ended up. Most of them are the first kid to go to college, the first kid to become a medical doctor, the first kid to become a teacher, and it reviews what a number of his students ended up doing with their lives as a result of his caring, rather than the insane mindset that projects its own pain and its own trauma and has to find somebody to blame. But it's an interesting look into that community, McFarland. Powerful. But if those people get removed, is it going to be food in the grocery stores? Because who could pick it? Second, if you want to see what happens to home prices, the crash is going to be unbelievable. And if anybody hasn't been watching, we had a home price crash back a few years ago. And interestingly enough, the commercial real estate market was in the same trouble, but it didn't crash. But watch it. It's very likely coming. So anyway, that's just another aspect of it. And so for many reasons, we need to, I think, gather our communities together, whatever our nationalities are. And there are some challenging global times coming, and we need all Americans to be pulling together. We need all Americans to be focused in on community within our communities and caring and creating ways of living that might alter pretty significantly when you look at what's happening on the global stage. So just something to be aware of. Beyond that, breathing time. And do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up, Jeannie, or anything happening in the chat room?
No hands up in the switchboard, and Bob is with us in the chat room, and he said, good day, folks. He couldn't sleep. He has back pain. Ouch. We need all humans to come together, hey? Yes, we do.
So, Bob, we just tap into your energy and feel our hands are literally moving into the tissue of your back, softening, warming, assuring every cell that it's safe, supporting you and assisting you in taking your breath down to the deepest levels of your spine and letting whatever energies are stored there just process out of your structure, extending that to you and that same energy to every person on the planet who has back pain. You know, one of the sayings that we're going to cover today alludes to the oneness of life and the fact that Albert Einstein says, if you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion. And most people's whole lives are based on total, complete optical delusions with no comprehension whatsoever of what truth is. And, you know, maybe somebody smarter than Einstein knows better when they say, oh, he's crazy when he says there's only one of us. But the truth is, there's only one of us. And so your back pain is our back pain. And we share that energy with you, and we breathe into that space within ourselves that resonates with you and opens and brings healing to every person on the planet with any sort of back issue. Spent, better than 50 years with daily back pain. Was born with a deformity in my spine. Spent over 50 years. There wasn't a day without back pain, sometimes so excruciating that I couldn't move. And fortunately, about 15 years ago, we were sponsoring a course at Heartland called Orthobiotomy. You might check and see if there's an orthobiotomy practitioner down there to work with, Bob. But Jeannie had never done any hands-on healing work, but we were students. This was a physician that we sponsored being at Heartland to teach his class, so we were students in it. And he taught the moves for working with the low back, and Jeannie came over, never having done anything like that before, put her hands on me, did the orthobiotomy moves, and I haven't had one scintilla of back pain since. Not one. So recognizing that it's all energy, and Rob, I share the energy of a healed spine with you. And hold the space for a deep breath into that space, and undoing any form of disintegrative energy in your spine and the spine of every human on the planet.
He said thank you. He's feeling the healing, and he actually has an osteopath that's brilliant, and he sees her in 2 days.
Ah, cool. Cool, yeah, osteopath. The orthobiotomy work came out of the hands of an osteopath, actually, who studied Ayurveda medicine in India and put his osteopathy together with Ayurveda and came up with the orthobiotomy. So if you're in good hands with an osteopath, for sure. So breathing into that space. And if you're out there in listener land, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you're listening on a station where we can't see you in our control panel, if you're in one of those syndicated places where our show shows up, then if you call into the show, 563-999-3581, you'll be listening to the show directly, and then if you just push 1, through the magic of technology, a hand will raise, and Gina will introduce you by your area code. And sending appreciation to the last 14 years with BlogTalk, going into 15. Unfortunately, they are going away in January, so please watch for, if you don't catch it on the show, the information will be on our website prominently displayed as to where we'll go at the end of January. There'll be a different way of coming into the show. It won't be through this phone number, at least as far as we know. Now, some miracle could happen that we find a way to keep this phone number and move on to another platform, but we'll be doing that. But if you call that number and then push 1, we'll be having a conversation. And so, Miss Jeannie, do we have anything happening in the phone queue, chat room?
No, so go for Thomas.
Okay, so saying 75. If you're new to the show, we're going through the book of Thomas, which is one of the texts that did not get canonized at the Council of Nicaea. I guess it didn't serve Constantine's purposes as a warrior and a political misfit to bring this one into the canonized texts. But it's written by Thomas Didymus, purportedly, and they're, rather than a story form, they're a series of sayings of Yeshua. You know, if you look into the traditional scriptures, it talks about how to the public he taught in parables, and then there was an inner teaching. And so often people, so much of what has been called Christianity has been outer directed. It's all about what's going on out there, changing things, dealing with things out there. And few really get the import of the inner work that Yeshua presented. And so this is a really powerful set of sayings. Certainly have impacted me energetically in my comprehension of the teachings of Yeshua from the first century Aramaic. So saying 75, he says, there are many standing at the door, but the solitary are they who shall enter the bridal chamber. Now, of course, the bridal chamber is entered two by two. What's he saying here? He's saying that, unfortunately, the chances of finding someone who's willing to enter into this door, into this level of work in a partnership is slim. That chances are one person in a relationship will do the work and the other person won't have any interest or have very little interest, not wanting to go into the depths of one's own mind, one's own heart, one's own unconscious. You know, the average person spends about the first 40 years or so in the desert. And, you know, you listen to that story about the desert, and you're not hearing a story about a hot, sandy place in the Middle East. You're hearing a story about those who live unconsciously, having no idea that these teachings were directing us within to do the inner work of healing. So Yeshua was saying that in this particular passage, and obviously there are going to be lots of people who have relationships whose partners will not participate, and that does not inhibit their doing their work. So he says the solitary individual will enter the bridal chamber, will enter into this place, and the bridal chamber being a place of joining, and where we individually and collectively rejoin with our true nature. And to enter the bridal chamber in this context also means that you leave the world behind. You know, you hear Yeshua talking, and he says, I am in this world, but I am not of this world. Most people are in this world and of this world and are directed by the energetic patterns that are flying around in the world. You know, this is something we got into in our still point breathing session discussions this weekend. And when you look at this, the main governing law of the universe is the law of resonance, the law of energy exchange. So if I hit a middle C tuning fork on a desk, it sets up an energy field. You know, think about throwing a pebble in a pond. When the pebble lands, waves go out from the pebble in the water. Well, in exactly the same way, when a middle C tuning fork vibrates, it sets up a certain frequency. If you put it in front of that second tuning fork has no choice but to also vibrate. The second tuning fork can't say, oh, I know I'm a middle C, but I don't like that note, so I'm not going to play it. It doesn't have any choice. That energy is going to move. And few people realize that this is the key to our creatorship and understanding how it is that we draw things to us. You know, if you haven't read my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Unfortunately, we can't sell you a copy because it's out of print. Been thinking about reprinting it, but haven't put the wherewithal together to do that yet. But you can download it free from our website if you just go to whyagain.org/book. You can download a PDF of it free in, I think, 9 different languages now. You can find it, although the book was published over 30 years ago, or just about 30 years ago. We did sell enough of them back then when we had it in print that it's still floating around everywhere. Used bookstores. You can always find lots of copies on Amazon, lots of used copies on eBay. So it's easy to find if you want to have a physical book in your hand. And it's brings up a little bit of embarrassment that my book now sells for $4 on eBay. But anyway, used copies. Anyway, it's out there, and it explains how this energetic world works and how we are resonating beings. And if I hold, let's say, for instance, something based in some form of hostility or fear is like the pebble moving in the pond. Energy creates motion. By definition, energy is motion. Without motion, you wouldn't have energy. And everything that's in motion sets up a wave. The wave that's set up sets up a resonating field, and anyone else who has a similar energetic pattern within themselves, there will be, like there is between the 2 tuning forks, an energy exchange. If I hit a middle C tuning fork on a desk and I put it in front of a middle A tuning fork, what happens to the middle A tuning fork? Nothing. The energy just passes right to it. It's transparent. There's no transfer because there's no match in energy. So if I find myself changing the title of my book to "Why Are They Doing This to Me Again?" If you got somebody in your life, if they be different, your life would be okay. Liar, liar, pants on fire. You notice if you've been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the one that was there every time. Your stuff is about you, but if you project it into your brain's image of everybody else, you can really believe that it's about everybody else. And most people have taken the teachings of Yeshua and gone, oh, this is about everybody else, rather than applying it to themselves. So if I have some sort of an hostility or fear-based energy, guess who's going to show up? Resonance is going to draw somebody with a similar energy, because a frequency in one mind will tend to activate the same frequency in another mind if it's there. Now, when that other person draws into you through resonance, and if it's some form of hostility or fear, if they are unconscious, then the energetic pattern of hostility and fear in you, and it's very specific. I don't want anybody to ever do this to me again. You'll pull somebody in who has the capacity to do whatever the this is. Now, one of 2 things happens at that moment. And I'm saying this because we are all drawn to others through our own unresolved patterns. So if I'm drawn to someone who has this need for some form of abuse, and I have a matching energy, I'll tend to be drawn to them, and I'll have the inclination to do that form of abuse. If I'm in projection, if I'm in denial of the content of my own mind, then I'll probably tend to just be driven by that energy of abuse moving within me. Boom. There, I'll do it. I'll walk away saying, geez, I don't know why I did that. I never meant to do that. That's not what I intended when I went in there. But I did it because that energy was in me. Now, if I'm conscious enough, and so back up a thought before I get to that, being conscious enough. Most people don't recognize that through the energetic patterns they hold unresolved in themselves, draw and literally direct the behavior of those around them to do those things. And that's where, people say things like, why is everybody the same? Why are so many people like that? Well, whatever your like that is, stop talking about them and start talking about yourself, because the like that keeps happening to you is yours. It's about you. And if you take the tools and go within, you'll find the trauma energy somewhere in your tissue structure, and your tissue structure is probably complaining with some form of pain or trauma. And when you access when you get to the origin of that toxic energy and you bring it forward, and that's the objective of the reality management forgiveness process. That's the tool that's in our app. If you apply forgiveness to that area in yourself, then literally the instant you do, the tissue will heal. The pain will disappear. And if you don't, this other person is going to tend to be driven by the energetic pattern that you're sending out. In other words, they're going to do exactly what you don't want to have done. Now, if this second person is very conscious, they will notice the inclination to do whatever that form of abuse is that you need to have. And people say, wait a minute, I don't need to have that abuse. Well, if you're holding that energy within you and refuse to deal with it, yes, you do need that form of abuse. Well, Michael, that's stupid. Why would the universe do that to me? Because the universe abhors disease. The universe wants you alive and vital. And if you hold a disease energy, the way the universe has been set up is to send you someone, resonate somebody into your space that's going to show you exactly what you're holding on to. If you stop projecting it and you own it, it will be your opportunity to heal. Now, this second person who's drawn in to do this abusive behavior, it is also their opportunity to heal. If they are conscious and they notice, they've got a commitment. I'm here to be a human being, to function out of active present love. And I notice this discomfort and this rage moving in me. Instead of responding to the demand for rage from the individual that hates ragers and abusers, instead of responding to that demand, one notices, oh, there's abuse coming up in me. There's a rage coming up in me. I'm going to apply forgiveness and free myself of that. Thank you, friend, for showing me that part of me. So in any given circumstance where there's a potential for trauma and pain and the repeat of patterns, there's the same potential for healing for both individuals, or for the individual, either one or both, who choose to get conscious and to do their work. Person literally being resonated or driven by that unconscious energy from the person they're approaching also has the opportunity to heal. Now, many people, in that explanation I just gave, will hear, oh, so if I'm abusive with somebody else, it's their fault that I'm abusive. No, that's not what I said. It is their responsibility that they have drawn you in with your abuse. The abuse is your responsibility. When they show up and you start using your abusive tone or whatever it is, they have the opportunity to breathe and go, oh, I have this terror about people who use an abusive tone. Thank you for showing me this terror. I'm going to apply forgiveness to this terror and free myself of it. By the way, would you like support in healing whatever the pain is about that you're using that abusive tone? And the second person applying forgiveness now moves into healing. And since we are cells in one body, there's only one of us. If there, of the 7.5 billion people on the planet, if there's only one person in all the world that knows how to do exactly the kind of abuse you don't want to have done, it doesn't matter where they are in the world. Resonance means they will find you, and you will find them. And one of two things will occur. You'll stay in denial of your pain, and you'll go, look what they're doing to me again, and miss the opportunity to heal. Life abhors disease and is always sending someone with a resonance that matches the disease that each of us holds, in order to give us one more opportunity, one more chance to choose again, and to recognize, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people, and I'm the only one that was there every time. This is about me. It's not about them. And each person in every abusive situation has the opportunity to get conscious and do their healing work. But life will send you an endless stream of people as long as you're holding on to a frequency, to an energy of some form of hostility or fear. And, to hold on to it, it's somewhere in your tissue structure. The body is the mind. The cells are where this information is stored. Every disease, there is no such thing as a disease that does not have a component of mind energy that matches that disease process locked in that tissue. There's no such thing. There is no other cause of disease. Well, come on now, Michael. You don't really understand. There are these things called bacteria and viruses. That's what causes it. Didn't you know that causes disease? Well, actually, I do know that there is no such thing as the cause of a bacterial infection belonging to the bacteria or a viral infection belonging to the virus. And I can prove it very easily. I mean, anybody who's interested in the truth can prove that very easily. If you want to prove that to yourself, find an acre of land, mark it off, and on the farthest corners in the acre, rope off 1 square foot of land on each corner, the farthest corners from each other. And then do a count of how many bugs and buzzards and creepy crawly things and bacteria and viruses are on one corner. And then go way over to the other corner of the acre and count how many are there. You know what you're going to find? It's identical. However, if you, let's say, for instance, take a dead rabbit and put it on one corner or the other, and let's say it's a nice warm temperature today, body temperature, 98.6 degrees. Let's say you leave that rabbit on that particular roped off square foot of the acre for 2 or 3 days, and then come back and go to each roped off corner and count the number of bacteria, viruses, bugs, buzzards, etc. Do you know where the elevated count is going to be 1,000% of the time? It's going to be where the dead tissue is. Well, Michael, what does that mean? Here's what it means. There are things called reducer organisms. When you set a disease process into your tissue structure, the Creator has decreed that there will be a reducer organism that will devour, digest, and rid the world of the tissue that is not fulfilling its function. If you look at the lion in the jungle, the lion doesn't talk to its friend. They hunt in pairs or 3 or 4 of them. They don't get together and go, let's see, you see those water buffalo over there? You see that great, he looks juicy, that great, big, strong-looking, tough water buffalo? Now, let's go get him. No. They look for the weakest, the decaying tissue in the herd. They're reducer organisms, no different than the bacteria or the virus. And they go after the weak and the decaying inside and outside of the body. So causes tissue to decay. It's the presence of an energy that doesn't belong in one's own flesh. Remember, if you go to the opening words in the book of John, we're told by the Greeks, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. If Yeshua sat somewhere and listened to that, he'd say, that's all Greek to me, because that's not what was said. What those words say was, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Think a thought. You produce a molecule. Molecule in the body circulates around in the structure till it finds a receptor site that matches. Molecule lands on the receptor site and inserts itself in the cell. If we were sitting inside the cell watching that neuropeptide come and land on the receptor site on our cell and insert itself, what we would see is what we call chemistry entering the cell. Mind energy becomes flesh. Disintegrative mind energy becomes disintegrative chemistry in the cell. And the Creator, the universe, abhors that. So if you hold some form of disintegrative energy, that's the first thing that's going to show up in your life. Because wherever you're holding that disintegrative energy within yourself, you're disintegrating. And life doesn't want you to disintegrate. And forgiveness is the way that one collapses the projections. What's going on inside of me is about you, and empowers me to go inside myself and find the hidden energy that's there. Of course, it takes willingness to do that. And so recognizing how the healing and the disease process occur, where there is diseased tissue, the energetic pattern in that diseased tissue is going to draw somebody into your space to show you what you're holding on to. If when they do or say whatever it is that they do or say that brings that up, and you actually do your work, then you get to free yourself. And understanding those principles is what this work is all about. So delighted that you're here to be part of that process. And Miss Jeannie, just checking in before we move back to the text. Anybody in the phone queue with a hand up? Anything happening in the chat room?
It's all quiet. Go for it.
Okay. So when tying in with this thought, again, let's read it, 75. There are many standing at the door, but the solitary are they who shall enter the bridal chamber. Each one is going to have to do their own work. We can support each other. If you're blessed to find a partner who's willing to enter that door with you, more power to you. And the whole objective of the work is to leave behind the energetic patterns of disintegration that come from generations and generations and generations of not knowing. You know, there's an interesting passage in the traditional scriptures where Yeshua says, you've got to hate your father and hate your mother. You've got to hate the world if you're going to do my work. And again, people not understanding, looking for an external meaning for that. Somehow or other, they feel like they can justify hate. But in Aramaic, that word that's been translated to the Greeks is hate in that passage. In essence, it applies to this particular passage. You can't take disintegrative energy into the bridal chamber with you to leave the world behind. So hate your mother and your father, in a sense, has got nothing to do with love-hate. It means if you have a mother or a father that's a power person, in order to enter into the gate, you're going to have to free yourself of the disintegrative energies of that power person dynamic. Because you can't bring a lower energy pattern into a higher energy state. However, you can call upon the higher energy states in yourself to transmute or change the lower energy patterns, and that's the whole objective of this work. So statement 76. And he says, the kingdom of the Father is like a merchant who had a load of goods and found a pearl. That merchant was wise. He sold the load and bought for himself the pearl alone. You also seek after that treasure which does not perish but endures, where moth does not enter to devour, where worm does not destroy. So we all come into the world and we're trained to be servants of the world. That's the merchant. And, you know, we've been taught very, very well by most of this world that the whole objective is get as much stuff as you can. The money, go for the money. And at some point, we wake up. You know, when I first started doing this work, I had 3 businesses, I had about 60 employees. I thought the game was about going out there and getting the goods. Fortunately, you know, it's interesting. There was a friend who was in the real estate business. This is back before I started doing anything with this type of work. And he told me about a course that he took. His company required him to take it, and he hated it. But he told me a little bit about it, and I realized for me that was the pearl of great price. I had to do that course. That's what started me on this path. I knew it. When he taught, he just said a few things about it, and he did not like it at all. His company had forced him to take it. He didn't go of free will. So this is the person who's caught up in the world, and I recognize this parable really well because it was me. I literally had 60 employees. I worked 16 hours a day, 9 days a week. Or at least that's what it felt like. And it took me about 6 years in that merchant world to walk away and pursue the pearl. I literally one morning had the guidance to get up, close the businesses, sell them, and walk away. And that's exactly what I did. Sold the load, all the stuff, the goods. And fortunately, and it's partially through choice that I did this, and it was partially through circumstance, that this understanding, this work of inner healing, this work of functioning truly as a human being rather than as an hostility or fear-based being, recognizing that the truth of our human life, if you and tap into the essence of a human life, the only thing you can describe it is as the presence of love, of sweetness, of purity. That's the pearl of great price. It's your human life. And if in all you're getting, this particular passage, where moth does not enter and devour and worm doesn't, in other words, you're not going to find it in the physical world. So this merchant sold everything he had and bought the pearl. So it seems the world offers us everything you could want. All the stuff, the food, the drink, the fun times, the wealth, the power, all that the world offers. And is there something wrong with having that? Absolutely not. But if you, in all you're getting, you don't get being, then you aren't. If you don't have a human life, if you don't live as a human being, as you are created, if you have not discovered that, if you're functioning out of a false image, a false self in the mind, an hostility and fear-based self, you remember Yeshua said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. He's saying, you, pearl of great price, in order for you to come alive, you've got to die to this self that's been brainwashed in the world to blame and to be in hostility and fear and gather stuff and think that stuff makes us successful. If you don't have a human life, then you have nothing. Well, you get to go through an experience, but the experience is more like a computer game running. Somebody goes through all these experiences, but if the experiencer, if the being, love, is not awakened, then all it is the unfolding of a pattern. There's no real life there. So, when they said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, they weren't talking about someplace off in the sky. They were saying, find the space in you. Those words, kingdom of heaven in Aramaic, properly translated, say the community of love. Find the truth of who you are, and then live from that, and go grab whatever you choose to out of the world. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but if you lose your human life to it, then of what use is it? This is a shot at being eternal, of waking up to who you are and literally being eternal. And then saying 77. Before we do that, I'll check in with G. seeing as how we're down to a little less than 15 minutes, sweetie. Do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up?
No.
Anything happening in the chat room? Anything in the app? Anything from email questions?
No, it's all quiet.
All quiet, okay. If you're out there in listener land, again, if you're listening on one of those stations where we can't hear you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. Call that number you're listening to the show directly. And then if you push 1, raise his hand in the control panel, and we'll have a conversation. So number 77, Yeshua says. Remember, Yeshua is the man, a.k.a. Jesus, the Greek name that was given to him. It was not his name. They were bringing a rabbi into the Greco-Roman world. The rabbi was not very acceptable in the Greco-Roman world, so they came up with a name that everybody would relate to and everybody would understand. Everybody knew who Zeus was, right? Hail Zeus. Hey Zeus. His name was Yeshua. And he says, I am the light that is over them all. I am the all. The all has come to me, and the all has attained unto me. Piece of wood. Cut a piece of wood in two, and I'm there. Raise up the stone, and you'll find me there. This is Einstein. If you think you're separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical illusion. So he's saying there is one of us, and wherever you look, true being, the true self, is behind everything. And if you think you're separated from it, that same light, that same breath of life is alive in all of us. And, you'll notice that there's action here. You cleave a piece of wood. I'm there. That's a metaphor I would offer for open your own mind, go inside yourself, and you will find there resides your human life. If you have been trained into being an hostility and fear-based being, if you've been trained into being a card-carrying member of the one world universal religion of blame, then you live though you are separated. You live in the optical delusion. Literally, one who's in that state lives according to the pictures built by the brain and painted on the inside of their eyeballs. People think that with their eyes they can actually see something, when the truth is you have never seen anything with your eyes and you never will. The eye is simply a receiving device that brings in frequencies of light. Information carried on frequencies of light, just like the information carried on the carrier wave on your TV set, broadcast from a broadcast station, is received by the antenna, and the picture that's encoded in that carrier wave is decoded and brought into expression through the TV. And so it is with our human lives. And the objective here, again, listen to Yeshua when he says, I am in this world, but I am not of this world. In other words, people out there who are setting a frequency incline each other to certain behaviors. And they do this dance, and he says, I'm not part of that dance. I am in this world, but I'm not of it. Whatever frequency you bring to me, I'm going to function as a human being because I've discovered the truth of who I am as a created human being, as a light to the world. And if you look at the passage where, we're told he says, I am the light of the world, He uses precisely the same words. The only thing that changes is the pronoun when he says, "You are the light of the world." So when you recognize that we all share exactly the same light, that we are not separated nor separate from the rest of humanity, then when we look within, we find the truth of who we are as human beings. And so allow yourself to just take a couple of deep breaths on that thought. Statement 78. He says, "Why came you to this field? To see a reed shaken in the wind? See something external? And to see a man clothed in soft raiment? So behold, your kings, your great men, they're clothed like that. But they are not able to know the truth." This kind of ties into the parable of the rich man. You know, it's easier for the camel to enter the gate than a rich man to enter the kingdom. Camel to go through the eye of a needle. And that's one that's just totally, when you put that into Greek, it just makes no sense. A camel's going to go through the eye of a needle. How do you make sense of that? That's impossible. Well, that's because the Aramaic language is rife with idioms. If you know the Aramaic idiom, and you know the Aramaic scenario that's happening, you know that Jerusalem is a walled city. But you know, outside of a walled city could be pretty dangerous. And these were hospitable people who welcomed their neighbors. They followed the dictate of their teaching that said, welcome the stranger, care for the stranger like he or she is like one of your own. You'll notice that one's being violated by big time by people who pretend to be following the man named Yeshua. But they were hospitable people, and, you know, outside the gate could be pretty dangerous. So they closed the gate at night. But they always kept one gate open. And that gate was called the Eye of the Needle. And it was a small gate. They didn't leave the main gate open at night so that a band of robbers could bring their camels in and rob the place. The gate that was open was the Eye of the Needle. It was a small gate that a stranger could come in, but the stranger could not even get his camel loaded down into that gate. In order to get the camel to enter the Eye of the Needle, you had to unload the camel. You had to get the camel down on its knees, and you forced the camel through the gate because it was small, so invaders could not invade. And if they did invade, they had trouble getting back out again. They couldn't. So it was a protective mechanism. But until you know that idiom, like so many things in the Aramaic scriptures, it just makes no sense. So he's saying it's easier for the camel to get through the eye of the needle than someone who's loaded down with possessions, who's so locked into their stuff that their identity is all tied up in their stuff. Their fancy cars, their fancy houses, their fancy clothes, their fancy parties. Everything's got to be just so, and they stress and strain themselves to try to make it all look good rather than just appreciating the blessing that they have and knowing that the true beauty is in living as a human being, living a human life. You remember that passage where Paul talks about, if I do everything, if I take all the orders that are given in the scriptures, I give my body to be burned, I give everything I have to the poor, I sell everything and I give them money. If I do all of that, but if I haven't done it from a state of being, if I haven't discovered my own human life yet, he says, I'm as a tinkling cymbal. like there's nothing to me. Until one discovers their true human lives, which is the created essence of love. And so here he's, there have been several passages lately where he's been talking about how people get confused, the outside with the inside. So here he's using an outer story. Why are you here? You're going to see something happen in the field, the reed shaken. You're going to see soft clothing. Well, you can do that. But those who have all of those things, if they don't have being, then they'll never know the truth of who they are as humans. So on that thought, I'm just going to invite everybody to breathe. And let's just take a moment and really imagine being able to lay aside for a moment every energy in you that resides, or pardon me, that functions out of any form of hostility, fear, sadness, grief, protection, rage, pride, functions out of stuff, thinking they've got a life. Just allow yourself to breathe into and imagine that you simply let absolutely everything go. All of the stuff. And you breathe, and with your inner eye, you turn your eye within and allow yourself to tap into the presence of light that is in you. One of those earlier passages in this text where Yeshua spoke about being the light, bringing the light into the world. Imagine you look within and you see in each cell of your structure there is this presence of light, this presence of love. And imagine as you focus on it and you breathe into it, it strengthens. And as you breathe into it, that light expands. And the light in each cell expands out to touch the light, meeting the light from every other cell. Trillions of lights within your structure, all joining into one powerful light that then radiates out into the world. In the same way that that light radiated out from the cell, it now radiates out from you throughout your whole community. And notice, because of this law called the law of resonance, the fact that you've chosen to focus in and strengthen that light, it resonates that light in others. And imagine as that light radiates from you and touches everyone in your community, that that light strengthens and expands beyond the borders of each form of the persons in your community. And the whole community joins in one light. When Yeshua said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf, this is what he was talking about. He was talking about critical mass in physics. That when enough people function out of this state of being, it will join with and strengthen the state of being in others. You are the light of the world. And that light expands beyond the borders of your community to your state, touching every person in the state you're in. Beyond the borders of the state to the surrounding states. And because you've chosen love, it strengthens the love in everyone it touches, that energy touches. Going beyond the state to the nation, beyond the nation to the world. Strengthening because you've chosen to focus into the light, strengthen light in every person on the planet. This is the critical mass that will bring healing to the world. Joining with you and being part of that critical mass Thank you for joining us. Create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world.